get this screen. That's Roberta ending. Okay, to Quincey. Alright, Ever Guide up. Let's go. So we approach her, and we're like, gosh, why are you so sad? And then it's like, wait, you're talking about a video game character dying. Gosh darn. And then Roberta's upset because we still like Lillian, but we're gonna say nothing and just make her feel worse about our friendship. And then again, we're gonna tell Lillian that it's nothing. Yeah, it's nothing. We're good. I don't want to tell you anything. Oh, this time we're gonna say nothing instead of defending Lillian. This is gonna be new. Okay. Samantha looked at the ground, rendering mute by Georgia's merciless criticisms. How could she respond when a small, mutinous part of her being, a part she did not want to admit she possessed, thought Georgia had a point? It was true. Lillian could be pompous, and she could be self-serving. She was cold, and she was distant. Samantha had thought these things before, and more besides. The only difference was, unlike Georgia, Samantha would not say such things out loud. She could not. She loved Lillian too much for that. Great. Change the subject. This is gonna be new too. Oh, it's nothing. Not really. It's nothing. Not really. Now that sounds awfully familiar. What do you mean? Samantha tensed, her eyes wide. She was not entirely sure how, but she got the intense feeling she had disappointed Lillian. It was not pleasant. In fact, it felt as though a bucket of cold water had been poured down the back of her school shirt. That is what you said to me earlier when I inquired about your welfare. You said there was nothing wrong then too, though there plainly was. I may have said that, but it was not out of malice. It was because I did not want to trouble you with my petty concerns. I would not have asked you how you were feeling if I was not troubled about your concerns, no matter how petty they may be. But that isn't fair, Lily. What do you mean? I mean, you could be so contrary at times. You say you are concerned about me, yet when I tell you how I feel, you turn the other way. Quite frankly, I do not know what I should say to you to earn your forgiveness, and I don't know what it... Ugh. And I do not know what it was I did to begin with that was so very worthy of your scorn. Samantha breathed heavily, one hand held to her chest. She would not normally have snapped at Lillian like this, but the gulf of silence that stretched between the pair had managed, over time, to eat away at Samantha's usual reservations, and perhaps her over-reveration of Lillian, too. Though Samantha respected Lillian a great deal, and still cared immensely for her opinion, she could not hide the fact that, often in their friendship, she had felt slighted, belittled, abused, unappreciated, sidelined, and snubbed. Lillian Wordsworth may have been a promising young poet, but she was considerably less talented when it came to the arcane arts of being a good friend. Maybe, Samantha thought, this was how Roberta felt about her. Hadn't Samantha treated Roberta in the exact same way Lillian was now treating her? Though Samantha's ear still stunned from the criticisms Roberta had thrown at her, she did not blame her friend for her outburst. She could not. Doing so would be the height of hypocrisy. Not when she herself knew how it felt to continually bite her tongue in Lillian's presence, for fear she would say something she would later regret, only to bite it so frequently her mouth swam with blood and everything tasted bitter. You have not been fair to me, Lily. I know you dislike it when I am too... Alright. You have not been fair to me, Lily. I know you dislike it when I am too maudlin. So I have been attempting to disguise my feelings for your peace of mind, yet this does not satisfy you either. At this point, I do not know what you want. Please enlighten me, because I would very much like to know. Samantha, calm down. We can't have a discussion like this. I am trying, but you're not making it any easier. I do not care for being spoken to like a small child, Lillian. Then start behaving like an adult. This is not a question of maturity. I'm just trying to tell you how I feel. Why must my emotions make me inferior to you? Why do you never take me seriously? Must you dismiss every single thing I say? I may have laughed your barbed comments off in the past, but that does not mean they did not hurt. I am tired of being treated like this, Lily. I thought we were friends. Lillian surveyed Samantha calmly, her hands folded in her lap, in a composed manner that did little to calm Samantha's shaken nerves. Though Lillian was not smiling, there was not a trace of smile on her face. She looked horribly smug in her swan-like serenity. If Lillian was a swan, what did that make Samantha? No doubt she was the ugly duckling. We were friends, Samantha, but how can we continue to be friends now? I believe you have made your own feelings about me quite apparent. Samantha gasped as though the air had been sucked out of her lungs. It was true she had been angry with Lillian, but she had not expected Lillian to counter her quite so coldly. Even now, she still wanted to be Lillian's friend. Perhaps she wanted to be more than that. Though she knew Lillian was not always a very nice person, that did not change the fact that Samantha liked being with her. Lillian delighted her as nobody else did, with her sense of humor, her quick wit, and her pretty face. Unfortunately, by the same token, nobody upset her quite like Lillian did. Samantha was not content to simply feel sad when she and Lillian argued. Instead, she felt devastated. Let Lillian say whatever she pleased about Samantha Taylor Coleridge, but at least she had never been one to do things by halves. We can skip. That was longer than I expected. Shoot, what are we supposed to do? Tell a lie. And then the only new thing should be talking with Quincey, and then whatever this ending is with ending 2. Oh gosh, what the frick was Quincey's voice though? I never remember. Hey Lillian, where did you disappear off to back then? Samantha was startled out of her thoughts by the sound of a voice. It drifted to her over the sound of her fellow classmates' collective chatter, not because it was louder than they were, but because of one single word embedded inside that sentence like a sparkling jewel. Lillian. Samantha had vowed that she would not think about Lillian, but she was incapable of doing so. She turned her head, her resolve in tatters after a scant 5 seconds, and searched. There, a few seats away from her, was Lillian Wordsworth. De Quincey, with her unmistakable head of bright blue hair, was beside her, to Lillian's seeming disapproval. Samantha realized at once it had been De Quincey who had asked Lillian that question, for Lillian replied to her in a low voice, not bothering to look the other girl in the eye as she did so. I did not disappear anywhere. I went to find a teacher and inform them about your twisted ankle, as I said. You didn't come back, though. Are you doubting me? De Quincey jumped as though she had been struck by lightning and held her hands before her, shaking them in such an exaggerated manner she may as well have been playing a role in a pantomime. No, of course not. Perish the thought. I would never call you a liar, Lillian. I was just wondering what happened to you, that's all. I was waylaid. De Quincey leant forwards, peering up at Lillian with the wide eyes of a child being told a spooky story. By what? It wasn't anything dangerous, was it? What do you mean, dangerous? I don't know. Maybe you were accosted by a bear or a wolf. Or perhaps a vicious ruffian with a knife. Why is she drooling? That's really creepy. Don't be ridiculous. There aren't any bears around here, and wolves have been extinct in England for almost 3 centuries now. As for the ruffian with a knife, such an encounter would be highly unlikely. Contrary to popular belief, those who live in the countryside are not all malformed, demented serial killers. Sorry if I was being rude. I just thought it would be exciting. Her idea of excitement troubles me. I just know what the general public likes, that's all. You mean the general public want me dead? Not dead, not exactly. How can one be not exactly dead? Either you are dead or you are not. There is not much room for leeway. I just mean all the best poets die young. It's the aesthetic of it. It would make you even more famous. But I've only published a few poems. I would prefer to live a little while longer, so that I may write more serious works of genuine literary worth, rather than be immortalized at the age of 17 with only a few imperfect verses to my name. Moreover, real life is never as exciting as crime dramas or murder mysteries. The chances of my being murdered were slim, unfortunately enough for you. Simply happened to stumble upon a fellow classmate who was lost and needed my assistance. That is why I cannot help you. My apologies. Lillian lied so smoothly that even Samantha, who knew the full extent of just how dishonest she was being, was almost taken in. Perhaps it had something to do with Lillian's calm voice, strong and smooth, never stumbling. Lillian really was an incredible person, and not just because of her poetry. Ooh! To Quincey, who had seemed somewhat deflated after learning Lillian had not had a skirmish with a knife-wielding maniac after all, perked up at this news. She was positively sparkling. So you're being a philanthropist then? In a sense. You're so cool, Lillian. You're always looking out for other people. I wish I could be more like that. Thank you. However, you don't need to praise me. I was just doing my duty as the head of the student council. You say that, but even so, though you always look so dour, your heart is exceptionally large indeed. Lillian bowed her head, but made no further attempt to correct Quincey. Samantha twitched. How could Lillian be so shameless? It was true that Lillian had helped her a great deal, and if Samantha had not stumbled upon her, she would most likely still be wandering around in the countryside, getting colder and colder until she could no longer feel her fingers. However, Lillian was hardly the paragon of virtue De Quincey seemed to regard her as. Lillian had not intended to help De Quincey when she had twisted her ankle at all. In fact, Lillian had been the reason De Quincey had twisted her ankle in the first place. Still, though nettled by this injustice, Samantha said nothing, simply looking at Lillian's face, guileless and guilt-free under the dim lights of the dining room, made her thoughts feel impossibly tangled. If she could not think straight when she looked at Lillian, how on earth could she speak? I hope your ankle is feeling better, at any rate. Don't worry about it, I'm fine. Never been finer. De Quincey beamed, flashing Lillian a small victory sign to confirm her words. I'm quite strong, you know? I've been knocked around far worse than that in the past. Oh. Lillian's single-syllable response did not, to Samantha's ears, seem particularly enthused, but De Quincey evidently interpreted it as a sign to go on. And go on she did. That's right, my big sister was quite an, forceful person. She was always playing pranks on me or getting me into trouble. I remember when we were little, Mother used to send us both to see an old man. I think his name was Mr. Hall, every weekend to learn Latin. We had to walk through the village on our own to Mr. Hall's house, and every weekend, without fail, we were picked on by a group of boys. I don't know why they liked teasing us so much. Maybe it was because I was so small for my age. Or maybe it was because of the fancy clothes our mother made us wear. Or maybe it was because they were bored. That might have been it. At any rate, my sister decided she wasn't going to stand for their teasing. She declared war on these boys and started to pelt them with stones. Ever since that day, we were locked into combat with those village boys. I wanted to run away, but my sister wouldn't let me. She forced me to join her in combat, gathering stones for her to throw. Of course, there were more of those boys than there were of us, so the outcome was inevitable. We always had to retreat. Sometimes the boys would capture me when we were trying to run away, and would keep me a prisoner for the rest of the day. I suppose it was somewhat fun, in its own way. Mostly I just stood around and watched them play football in the park, or helped them with their homework. This is so weird, but okay. You sound as if you were a great deal meeker back then than you are now. I suppose so. I was always shy as a child. I still prefer being on my own even now, but... De Quincey tipped her head to one side, her face wreathed in smiles. I would far prefer to be with you, Lily. You are such an uncommon genius. And at the age of 17, no less. It's awe-inspiring. As Samantha watched De Quincey flatter Lillian, she felt her own spirits, which had already been low, sink right to the soles of her shoes. Was that how she looked when she clung to Lillian, hungry for approval? Did she, too, look that pathetically, hopelessly infatuated? But De Quincey, though she was similar to Samantha in several ways, was different. Unlike Samantha, who gave up too easily and allowed herself to sink soundlessly under the weight of her own depression, Quincey did not give up. Even when Lillian rebuffed her advances or knocked her grasping fingers aside, Quincey did not stop. Neither did she seem to mind Lillian's habitual coolness. Maybe Quincey was made of stronger stuff than Samantha, or maybe she was just more shameless. Samantha was not sure, but she was sure at that moment. She felt acutely, achingly jealous. Anything to skip or nope, it's all gonna be brand new. Oof, this is harder than I thought. I forget these endings are kind of long. I mean, it's definitely worth it. It's just longer than I would expect. But I'm committed. We're doing this. I just need a sip of water. Okay. Samantha lay curled up in her bed. It was wooden and creaked, much like the floorboards in the dining room, with every slight motion she made. Each noise set Samantha's nerves on edge. Her fingers tightened around her duvet so hard her knuckles turned white. She must have looked like a ghost. She felt like a ghost. She felt like death itself. She could hear the howling wind as it brushed against the window pane with spectral fingertips, begging to be let inside. Percy and Roberta had already fallen asleep. Georgia had not. In fact, Georgia was not in the room at all. Samantha wondered where she had gone, but ultimately decided that she did not really care. Georgia was probably outside smoking, or bothering some of the other girls in the adjacent rooms. Despite her overwhelming cynicism, bitterer than black coffee, Georgia was strangely popular. Perhaps it was because of her charisma and her unparalleled athletic prowess. Samantha fingered a lock of her hair. Earlier that day, Lillian had said it was beautiful. It was the first time Lillian had complimented her in months. Maybe if she had not cut off all her hair, Lillian would still like her. Maybe, if she was still beautiful, she would have a chance. Samantha was not beautiful anymore, though. She had never felt further from it. Perhaps it was because she had lived in London for too long. There were few beautiful things in London. In London, the delicate flowers and abundant green hills of the countryside were eclipsed by gray concrete and scabby pigeons, pecking at crusts on the pavement. If you wanted to see flowers in London, the best place to go was to a florist, and Lillian had never liked such places. She disliked the way the most visually pleasing parts of nature were selected and stuffed into black plastic flower pots, sold to people who wanted something to help spruce up their kitchen tables. Lillian said she found the ostentatious bouquets on display in shop windows too methodical, too meticulous, too removed from reality to be moving, just like animals packed into cages in the zoo. Although Lillian was such a precise and orderly person herself, she could not stand that kind of order being imposed upon the natural world around her. Lillian, Samantha whimpered, curling up on herself. She missed Lillian. She missed her so much it physically ached, as though one of her teeth had been extracted by brute force, leaving naught behind but a pool of bright red blood. Samantha longed for Lillian's friendship, but her sensibilities were too macabre to allow for any careless optimism, and she very much doubted that would happen. Lillian was a woman of strong convictions, and she did not back down when she had made up her mind. Samantha knew the sensible thing to do would be to stop thinking of Lillian, but she could not. She had never been one for self-restraint, and she was even less capable of it when Lillian was involved. What could she do? What should she do? She didn't know, but she did know for a fact. Staring up at the ceiling would not offer her any answers. Samantha could not sleep. Her head was packed full with Lillian Wordsworth, to such an extent she feared her skull might splinter. If she could not sleep, then she had little purpose lying in bed tormenting herself. She was just making herself miserable. She needed to do something else. Anything else. Samantha got to her feet, her joints cracking in her wrists and knees. She was wearing her favorite nightdress, one she had found in the corner of a charity shop, which fell around her body in pale white folds. Lillian always said this nightdress made her look like a ghost from a gothic novel, but Lillian was not here anymore to make that observation. Samantha crept across the room, setting her naked feet down against the floorboard so carefully she may as well have been crossing a field of thorns, trying not to awake Roberta or Percy. Finally, she made her way to the door and opened it. pressing it open. Inch by inch, so it didn't creak. When she had opened the door far enough and was able to slip through the gap she had made, she was suddenly halted by a voice. "Hey, Sam, is that you?" Samantha blinked, alarmed, and peered out into the hallway. It was difficult to see in the dark, but Samantha did not eat nearly enough carrots to make up for it. But she did not need to be able to see to know who it was who was speaking to her. She knew that voice. It was Quincey. Samantha's body tensed, as though water had been poured down her back. She felt cold from the tip of her head right down to her toes. What are you doing out there? Okay, first of all, her hair looks freaking adorable. Second of all, I was about to say that her PJs looked cute, but then I realized where, like, bra stuff was and, like, underwear stuff, and I just, why game? Why? This is weird. This is weird. And they're teenagers. They're not, like, fully adults. Oh, this is weird. I couldn't sleep, just like you. I suppose that makes sense, but what do you want with me? Samantha tried to keep her voice steady, but she stammered all the same. This was not what she had in mind when she decided to set off on her late-night stroll. Quincey was the very last person she had wanted to run into. This was bad. This was very, very bad. Was it too late to escape? Hey, don't look at me like that. I'm not a monster. I want to have a word with you. Can I? Well... Samantha knew that when Quincey said a word, she did not truly mean that. Nobody ever did. Language was just a game to most people, something as vague and unfixed as smoke in the air. In actuality, Quincey wanted to have a talk, something that would require a good deal more time, energy, and emotion than a single word would. This is important. I've wanted to speak with you for the last 2 months, but you've been avoiding me, so I never got the chance. To tell the truth, it kind of hurts. I thought we were friends. I thought we were friends too, but I don't know. Then let's talk about it. We can't resolve anything if we don't talk, right? Okay, that pouty face is kind of cute though. Well, besides, it's late and neither of us can sleep. We might as well, don't you think? There's nothing else to do around here, unless you fancy climbing trees in the dark. Quincey's proposition was a sensible one, but Samantha was not sure if she was up to such a trying task. The prospect of a talk had never sounded more ominous to the young girl, as though it were a knell signifying her own imminent demise. And I have cigarettes. Tempted now? Samantha flushed. As much as she hated to admit her weaknesses, she had been craving nicotine lately. Smoking was relaxing. It helped soothe the rapid beating of her heart and made everything feel far less stressful. And she had managed to stress herself immensely this past hour, with all her circular thoughts about Lillian. Quincey grinned, her face a disembodied mask bobbing in the dark. Good, then let's get out of here. Samantha tried to light up her cigarette, but she fumbled with it. Her fingers were so frozen she could hardly even hold the lighter. This nightgown had not been made with the winter months in mind. The fabric was so thin it almost seemed to invite the cold air to impress its invisible, icy fingers against the hollows of Samantha's skin. Foolishly, she had neglected to put on her shoes before she had left her bedroom, and her feet were bare, exposed to the winds. She shifted, toes curling from cold, grinding against the hard earth and heather underfoot. It almost felt like her toes were calcifying. Perhaps, in a matter of minutes, they would become just as hard as those funny fossils you could find scattered throughout the English countryside, buried under hedgerows and in farmers' fields. What were they called again? Devil's toenails? Samantha had liked searching for them when she was younger, scrabbling around in the dirt with her muddied fingertips like a little dog. She had quite a collection of them at one point, lined up neatly on her bedroom windowsill. Samantha didn't know what had happened to them now. She hadn't been back home in years. Her mother had probably thrown them away. Her mother had always been good at doing that. So Quincey watched as Samantha struggled with the lighter and smiled. "You need a hand with that?" It's all right. I should be able to do at least this much." Samantha's fingers, however, were just as stubborn as Samantha was, and they refused to cooperate. "Damn." Samantha swore under her breath as the lighter slipped from between her fingers and hit the ground. Quincey smiled and bent down, fishing it up in the palm of her hand. "Here, let me try. I don't want you to burn down the entire Lake District." Samantha blushed. All the blood in her body migrated to her cheeks, so the tips of her fingers felt even colder. Was it just her imagination, or had they even started to turn blue? With an expert motion, well practiced over the years, Quincey lit the end of Samantha's cigarette. A small flame bloomed in the darkness, like the petals of a flower unfurling. Samantha took the cigarette and inhaled deeply. Thankfully, she didn't choke. She had done this one too many times to make such an amateur mistake. At least, that was one thing she could be proud of. So... Samantha plucked the cigarette from between her lips with shaking fingers and exhaled, her mouth pursed into a small O. What did you want to talk about?" Just like her fingers, Samantha's voice shook, trembling with a mixture of emotion she couldn't quite place. Maybe fear was one of them. Fear at having this conversation, which she had put off for so long. "Are you really asking? I thought it would be obvious. I'm talking about what happened just after the Christmas holidays, of course." Samantha swallowed hard. Of course, Quincey would want to talk about that, wouldn't she? The past loved to torment Samantha, dragging its claws into her sides anew, drawing flesh blood from old wounds that had just begun to close. Even though she did not want to, Samantha remembered what had happened. She remembered, only too clearly, in a surprising amount of detail, given how intoxicated she had been at the time. She remembered the pain shooting through the small of her back as she was pressed against the wall, and she remembered the hands gripping her own wrists tight, so tightly it stung. She remembered squirming, trying to break free, but it was no use. Quincey had been stronger than her, and Samantha had been drunk, and her body had not obeyed her even when she begged it to. Quincey's mouth had tasted foul, of cigarettes and alcohol, and it made Samantha choke. She hadn't been able to breathe, and her head had swum, and she hardly even registered that she was crying. As Quincey had kissed her, Samantha had been struck with the sudden thought that what she was kissing, or being kissed by, rather, was not another person with a beating heart underneath their skin. Rather, it was a duplicate of herself, an icy cold reflection in a mirror. Quincey was like Samantha, but with fewer inhibitions, far more comfortable in her unhealthy addictions than Samantha ever would be. The two were more similar than Samantha had thought, had ever wanted to think. They were both shameless, careless, and selfish. Wasn't that why Lillian had abandoned her after their several year-long friendship? Lillian hated her. Samantha had made Lillian hate her, and it was all her fault. She had nobody else to blame. Everything was all her fault. Samantha shivered at the memory, huddling up on herself for protection. Dang, Quincey, what the hell, girl? No! That was not okay. She wanted to wrap her arms around herself, but one hand held her cigarette, and she didn't want to drop it, not on the grass, or on herself. That seemed like the kind of stupid thing she would do. Her nightdress just wasn't enough. The material was too thin and flimsy, and she felt exposed, horribly exposed. Quincey looked her over, an unusually penitent expression playing across her face. I really am sorry I did that. It was pretty shitty of me. Quincey frowned, bringing her cigarette to her own lips. She inhaled for a long time, her eyes closed, lashes matted together. When she drew the cigarette away, she exhaled. A thick plume of smoke formed around her head like a halo. I don't remember everything that happened, though. Not exactly. I was pretty out of it at the time, which is probably why I did it in the first place. I imagine you enjoyed it more than you did kissing Simon, though, huh? Samantha's... Gosh dang it. Samantha's face turned bright red despite the cold. You know about Simon? Of course! You told me about him. Quite a lot, I might add. Oh, gosh. Samantha did not doubt that De Quincey's words were true. How else would she know about Simon if not from her own lips? But she could not remember confiding in the other girl. Telling one's secrets to De Quincey was an incredibly foolish move, given her love for spreading gossip. Samantha really must have been drunk if she had offered such sensitive information to De Quincey that night. She groaned, pressing her free hand against her head, hard. Maybe, she thought, if she pressed hard enough, she could push her eyes back through her sockets until they fell with a rattle into the recesses of her skull. That way, she wouldn't have to look at De Quincey's face anymore. She wouldn't have to be reminded of what the other girl had done to her. Her kisses had burned Samantha's lips, just like rubbing alcohol against exposed flesh. Now, however, it was Samantha's eyes that stung, as she applied an ever stronger pressure to them, to rival that of the deepest depths of the ocean. Today had been an unpleasant day all around, if dredging up old memories and ghosts that had long since been laid to rest. Perhaps De Quincey was some sort of grave robber, but not in a physical sense, rather in an emotional one. Samantha remembered Simon Fricker, though she rather wished she didn't. Simon Fricker was the brother of Roberta's beau, Edmund, and had been Roberta who had first introduced them. According to Roberta, Simon was nice, and Samantha needed somebody in her life who could be nice to her, and she was never nice to herself. Roberta had been right in that regard. Simon had been nice. His niceness, however, had bellied no deeper qualities, no political opinions, no complex thoughts. His head had been just as empty as a Halloween pumpkin, all ideas scooped out, leaving not a single seed left. Dang, that's harsh. His hands had been so clumsy they crushed hers when they tried to link them together, and when they went out for coffee, he had spilt Samantha's latte, not her drink of choice, over her lap. Even now, Samantha wondered why she'd allowed Roberta to set them up. Samantha had no real interest in boys, and she certainly had no interest in boyfriends. It could not be denied, however, that she had been a little bit curious. Teen magazines said it was normal for young teenage girls to start dating and experimenting, dipping a toe into the adult world of love and commitment and marriage. Maybe that was why Samantha had agreed. She just wanted to know what it was like. Maybe even she could have been normal, too, by the stipulations of those magazines. But being with Simon hadn't felt normal at all. It had been stilted and embarrassing and awkward, nothing more than a farce. When they went out together in public, Samantha had wanted nothing more than to retreat into herself and hide. Simon's fingers had been awkward and clumsy when he had searched for her hand during their first date, or when they tried to wind around the back of her chair when they went to the cinema. However, they had been utterly inept and ineffectual the first and last time they had slept together. He had tried to be gentle with her. Samantha knew that. He tried because he liked her. Maybe he even loved her, a little bit. But Samantha had not loved him. She had tried to like him because he seemed kind, and she probably needed somebody like him in her life. She had tried to like him so much, because she had worried she had raised his hopes, agreeing to go on a second date, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth, and she did not want to let him down. But it didn't work. She couldn't bring herself to enjoy his company. Whenever they were together, she found herself wishing fervently she were somewhere else, even if that somewhere else was swinging from a tree branch by the neck in Hyde Park. Sleeping with him had been born from desperation, in the hope she could, somehow, foster any kind of tender emotion towards him. She thought perhaps it could finally make her fall in love with him, but it hadn't. Instead, it had just made her like him even... Instead, it had just made her like him less, until even the thought of his face made her feel faintly nauseous. It had been the first time she had ever slept with anybody. The experience was supposed to have been something special, something precious, but instead it had been just as quietly depressing, as mediocre, as disappointing as the rest of their passionless, pointless relationship. After that, Samantha stopped answering his texts. She didn't answer her phone. She just ignored him, as she always did when faced with a problem. For indeed, to her, Simon was nothing but a problem. And that happened that. I don't see what this has to do with Simon. It's completely unrelated. Well, you told me you didn't feel anything when you slept with him, so I thought maybe you'd feel something if you kissed me. I don't know, just seems like a good idea. And I thought cutting my hair last night seemed like a good idea, and look where that got me. Well, you've got a point there. Is it really that bad? As a confessional writer who strives to always tell the unvarnished truth, I must be honest with you. It really does look bad. I knew it. Samantha frowned, her shoulders slumping. If even to Quincey, who dyed her hair so often it could range through all the colors of the rainbow in under 3 weeks, thought her hair looked bad, then it really must have been terrible. But I still have not forgiven you. You should not have done it. I know that now. I just did not know it at the time, given I was so drunk. Guess that's kind of bad, though. I know it isn't nice when other people force themselves on you like that. I mean, I've been on the receiving end a couple of times, so I should have realized. I suppose not. Samantha's eyes widened at the sudden pierce of information. She wasn't entirely sure how she should take it. She had certainly not heard about this before. You have? Well, yes. De Quincey smiled sheepishly. Let's just say, being homeless in London is not a lot of fun, even if it was only for a few months. You were homeless? Wasn't always incredibly enjoyable, but certainly was an experience, so I don't know if I regret it. If I'd never run away, I wouldn't have been able to come here, so it all worked out in the end. Well, Samantha looked at her feet awkwardly, pinching her cigarette between 2 fingers. Do you want to tell me what happened? Well, maybe. Since I know so many secrets about yours truly, maybe I should share a little. Quincey pondered, taking another drag of her cigarette to pass the time. The 2 girls stood together underneath the sparkling stars, gray smoke swirling in the air in a miasma. Samantha knew how her nightgown was going to smell suspiciously of cigarette smoke after this moonlight tryst, but she could not bring herself to care at that moment, not even if Miss Pope did happen to find out. Samantha had not smoked in 2 months. She had tried so hard to put an end to these self-destructive habits, which Lillian always criticized. Now, however, she saw no need to try. Lillian had already abandoned her, and Samantha couldn't see a single sliver of hope that their relationship might be rekindled. It was already too late, so she may as well indulge herself a little while in things that made her feel happy. It was only a fleeting happiness, which quickly gave way to self-doubt and harsh admonishment. But Samantha had always been bad at planning for the future. That was why her clothes were always so rumpled and ill-suited for the season, her hair a tangled mess, as though she'd been dragged backwards through a mulberry bush. Despite being a supposedly smart girl, Samantha could be very stupid at times. It was part of her personality. Well, it's just a sob story, I suppose. Nothing too interesting. The wind whistled, chilling the exposed back of her neck. Samantha shivered. Her body was even stiffer than that of the eerie mannequin standing in the window of that old bridal boutique around the corner from the St. Mary's boarding houses. Ooh, we got an achievement. Confessions of an English opium eater. I was sick a lot as a child, so my childhood was very isolated. My mother did not let me go outside often, so I spent my days inside, with little to do. Hold on. Ba-ba-ba. This music is a little loud. Just for this particular one. I was homeschooled until I was 11, owing to poor health and my mother's own desire to keep an eye on me at all times. I just liked being stuck inside all day with her, with nothing to do save multiplying fractions and staring at the wallpaper in my bedroom. My mother was an enthusiast of rote learning. It would often make me memorize long strings of information without telling me why I had to remember such things or why they were useful. It was monotonous. monotonous. I don't know, but I could not see the point of it. When I tried to tell my mother this, however, she became angry. She said she was sacrificing a lot to teach me, so I should be grateful for her guidance. I think she was something of a control freak. She still is. Eventually, however, my mother decided I could no longer stay at home and be educated by her. As such, she decided, reluctantly, I am sure, for she always hated being wrong, to send me to school. A lot of children dislike going to school, but I was the opposite. I loved school. It meant that finally I could get away from my home and interact with others my own age. I was good at my studies, and I got praised a lot by the teachers. Some of my classmates were jealous of me, but I held my ground and had never descended into bullying. I had a lot of fun while it lasted. My mother worried that I was becoming too complacent, I suppose. After a scant 2 years, she decided my current school was unacceptable and sent me elsewhere. I did not like my new school very much. It was far smaller than the first, and the teacher, Mr. Spencer his name was a blockhead who was perpetually anxious that I would reveal his own ignorance. It was horribly dull, and I spent every single day trying to find new ways to distract myself. Evidently, my dear mother was of much the same mind, for she decided to send me to yet another new school. She hoped at my new school I could study more seriously. Excuse me. She wanted me to go to Oxford, you see. I believe she still does. However, moving around so much had been rather disruptive, and I found it difficult to settle in. My grades had always been good, and it put a great deal of pressure on me, both from my mother, whose expectations had always been high, and from my teachers. Though I had disliked my old school for being too easy, I found my new school was stressful. I did not have many friends, and I felt isolated. I could hardly concentrate at all. One day, I just snapped. I gave in to impulse, something I had always been trying to suppress, thanks to my mother, and ran away. I ended up on the streets of London with no money at all. I had used the bulk of it on train tickets and had only a few notes left. Despite being gifted academically, I did not think my plan through very well. I was starving and cold, and I was in the middle of November. I didn't have anywhere to go, and I didn't know what to do, but I tried to stick it out. I didn't want to go back home. I was afraid of what my mother would say, and at any rate, I didn't have enough money to pay for a train ticket back. Samantha stared at Quincey in shock. She had never imagined that any of her own classmates, attired in their pastel-colored St. Mary's uniforms that smoothed out any possible imperfections, could have had such a miserable experience. It didn't seem possible. It was almost like she had Give me 2 seconds. Refocusing. After I don't press buttons on my own headset control. It was almost like that sad short story about the little girl who sold matches with white fingers, stained black with frostbite, until she inevitably succumbed to the winter and collapsed, motionless on the ground. De Quincey spoke about it in a detached way, a small smile on her face, as though she were relaying a story about a friend of a friend, or else the plot of a book she had been reading. How did she sound so light, so airy? Samantha knew if she had a similar story to tell, she would not have hesitated to embellish it with grandiose language suited for a sermon. But how are you able to survive? I got by. I'm standing here right now, aren't I? De Quincey took another drag of her cigarette, which had now begun to burn down. She held the smoke inside her lungs for a few seconds before exhaling it in wispy, ghostly coils that emitted from her pursed lips. After this gesture, she let her cigarette fall to the earth, snuffing out the faint light from underneath the heel of her shoe. Unlike Samantha, De Quincey had remembered to wear shoes. Even De Quincey was more organized than she was. That was kind of depressing. Ooh, she pretty though. Dang, De Quincey. It was cold outside. Like I said, last winter sure was merciless. I managed to find lodgings, but the house I took refuge in was cold and draughty, in a state of complete disrepair. The paper was peeling from the walls, and there was mold growing in the skirting board. I must have inhaled all kinds of toxic spores when I curled up in my bed at night and tried to sleep. Tried being the key word, because lying in that bed felt like curling up under a sheet of snow. The man who rented it to me was nothing short of a crook. I suppose I should have known as much, given he seemed to have 2 names. How one day he would refer to himself as Mr. Brown, and another as Mr. Brunel. Who needs 2 names if it's not to commit some kind of fraud? He would not even let me use the house during the days. I had to stand around outside, trying to find something to occupy my time until 7 or 8 in the evening. I've lost count of the long evenings I spent, sat on park benches in Hyde Park, trying not to freeze to death. The situation was so miserable, I even borrowed used cigarettes, more than once, from homeless people. They offered them to me, said I looked like they needed them more than I did. And I did. It was because they pitied me. I must have looked so pathetic, sitting out in the snow every day, shivering into my jacket. Hold up, I'm just realizing that wording is weird. Said I looked like they needed them more than I did. And I did. It was because they pitied me. I think the wording is supposed to be that it looked like she needed them more than they did. And they pitied her. The wording is so odd. I don't know if I'm wrong or not, or if I don't know. I'm grateful for the people who helped me. If they had not sat with me or engaged me in conversation or let me borrow their cigarettes, I fear I would have gone mad. Though I technically did have a home, I knew I was just the same as them. My clothes grew more and more dirty by the day, and I could not afford to buy new ones. The dye washed out of my hair, and it turned mousy and brown, like straw. The shower was broken at Mr. Brunel's home, and I could not even bathe. I had no idea what I was going to do. Though I hated the thought of calling my mother, I could not go on like that, slumming on park benches under the falling snow. I would freeze to death. Perhaps I was already halfway there. My hands kept shaking, and my legs spasmed in the night, so I could never get any rest. I had to wrestle with my pride and anxiety, but I buckled, called my mother, and sought her help. Quincey smiled sheepishly, pressing the tips of her fingers together. She was not very pleased at my escape from school, and said I was in a great deal of trouble. However, I was so sick after the experience, she perhaps felt too guilty to punish me. I had already been punished enough for my foolishness. I hadn't eaten properly in months, and I was so weak I could hardly move. I just lay in bed at home, staring up at my ceiling, with no desires, no aspirations, no anything. I could hardly think at all. That is, until a family friend brought me that book. It was a volume of collected poems by various authors, yet a couple of these poems stood out to me more vividly than the rest. There were poems that had been written by a young girl, a girl my age, a student at St. Mary's. Lillian! The poems by this girl. They had more of an impact on me than any of my prior education, either by the officious bore Mr. Hall or that fool Mr. Spencer ever had. They opened up my eyes to a whole new world, and they changed me completely. These poems. Samantha's hands slackened. She dropped her cigarette, still burning with a weak flame, to the ground. Quincey crushed it out for her beneath the sole of her shoe. When she drew her foot away, Samantha noted the crumpled cigarette butt was still smoking, but just faintly, like a will-o'-wisp or a ghostly memory. They were not the poems Lillian wrote, were they? Ding ding! We have a winner! Quincey grinned, prodding Samantha's cheek with her free hand, the hand not occupied with holding her second cigarette. Ow. Samantha winced at the sensation and pressed her hand against her cheek, pushing Quincey away with the other. Of course I was referring to Lillian. How many other budding female poets do you know in St. Mary's? Ones who have actually managed to get their material published, I mean. You have a fair point. You didn't need to prod me, though. But I couldn't help myself. Your cheeks are so proddable. Proddable isn't a word, and I have no idea what you mean by that. I mean, they're so big and round. You have acres of cheek. Literally acres. It's almost as though they're asking me to abuse them. My cheeks aren't big. You might want to look at your reflection in the mirror and then reconsider. Quincey tittered, evidently amused. Samantha shot her a glare, but she could not maintain its intensity for too long. She'd never been good at being cross, unlike Lillian. Okay, I think we could turn the music back up again. It sounds a little quiet now. That's good. Lillian excelled at being irate, whereas Samantha could only manage childishly huffy, and only for a few moments. I still don't think my cheeks are particularly prodigal, as you put it. But even if they are, that does not mean you should have done it. I'm sorry. It's all water under the bridge now, right? Don't decide that for me on my behalf. That is for me to say, not you. I guess. Sorry, Sam. Lillian's poetry, though, it really did help me. It helped me a lot. Lillian really is a gifted poet, isn't she? Indeed. I just flipped through that book of poems at first, really. I couldn't focus on any of them. It felt like my head was filled with fog. My hands were slow and clumsy, and I creased some of the pages of that book. Such a shame. I don't like damaging books, even though I have no compunctions about damaging my body. As if to prove her point, Quincey took another drag of her cigarette and exhaled. The pale smoke swirled through the air in delicate shapes, like spiderwebs suspended against the starry sky. But eventually, I read Lillian's poems. I read them over and over again, as though enchanted. My gaze was so intense, I feared I might burn a hole right through the paper. Her poems, they were so full of passion and so very earnest, even though the language was devoid of ornate trappings. They resonate with me in a way no other work of literature ever has, as though the author knew me and knew of my sufferings, though we had never met. I think they might have helped me recover, or encouraged me to do so at least, because they were so perfectly formed, and I wanted to be like that too. They made me want to try harder, to aspire to greater heights, to better myself, to try going on, I suppose. Something like that. It was all rather cliche, but then again, I have never been very adept at creative writing myself. These poems gave me a purpose, too, a goal. You wanted to go to St. Mary's and meet Lillian? Yes, I did not just want to. I felt as though I had to. I almost felt like I owed her my life. I wanted her to have... Man, the fact that Lillian is so rude to her now makes me feel mad. Like, this poor girl has been through hell and back. And Lillian's the reason she pushed herself to keep going. I wanted her to know just how much she meant to me. And even if I could not communicate those feelings successfully, I at least wanted to see her, to talk to her. I was a little anxious at the prospect of meeting her, given how I built her up to be an idol inside my head, but I decided I had to go forwards. I could not allow myself to give in. I was very adamant when I petitioned my mother about St. Mary's. She was nonplussed, to say the least. I had never been that determined about anything before in my life, so frequently had I been cowed into complying with her wishes, but not anymore. Eventually, my mother acquiesced. Perhaps she was happy I finally had found a goal for myself. The fact St. Mary's has a high percentage of students who later go on to attend Oxford or Cambridge may also have had something to do with that. And so I came here to meet Lillian, and in doing so, also happened to become acquainted with her best friend. Samantha held one hand against her cheek. Her nightdress fluttered around her legs like a shroud, or else the wings of a swan, exposing her skin, white and milky under the moonlight. You mean me, don't you? Of course. To tell you the truth, I still felt a few reservations about approaching Lillian, as enamored as I was with her poetry. And so I thought, after reflecting upon the matter, it may be easier and more natural to approach her, for I was already well integrated amongst her own circle of friends. Samantha blinked, realization finally dawning. She laughed softly, as though she had been told a private joke none but herself and the speaker could understand. Her voice soon trailed off into nothingness, lost in the darkness, to the wind and the moon. So you sought my friendship, not because you truly desired it, but because you wanted me to introduce you to Lillian at a later date? Partially, I suppose. That isn't the full weight of the matter, however. I was curious about you, too. I could not help but wonder what kind of friends Lillian Wordsworth would associate with. I imagined you, too, must have some of the genius she possessed, given you seemed so very close. Samantha smiled bitterly. Oh my god, that face, though. Her lips twisted from both the cold and her own self-derision. I hope I wasn't a disappointment. disappointment. Not exactly, but something close to it, right? Well, as I expected, you are worthy to be Lillian's friend. You are just as intelligent as she, and conversing with you is always intriguing. I must know, however, that when you are not bogged down in melancholia, as you have been as of late, it was often hard to get a word in edgewords when you began to philosophize. I apologize. I am aware I can talk too much. Lillian has pointed it out to me before. I just get so ensconced in my own thoughts, I get carried away. You don't need to apologize. I have enjoyed our talks in the past, and I really am glad I met you, though I have never yearned for your acceptance as I have done Lillian's. However, the inevitable however, I expected as much. De Quincey smiled, inhaling once more at her cigarette, giving herself pause for thought. After she had exhaled a lungful of noxious fumes, her lips pursed together. She turned her attention back to Samantha. I fear you and I may be too similar to truly get along. We are both adept procrastinators, both reckless, and both stubborn. And just like you, I like Lillian a lot, too. No, like is not the correct word. She is so far beyond me, I cannot content myself with mere liking. I love her. Samantha winced. It felt as though her heart was burning and was difficult to breathe. She held one hand against her breast. Contrary to the smoldering pain inside her chest, her fingers felt like ice and chilled her own skin underneath the flimsy material of her nightgown. She should have known. De Quincey's veneration of Lillian was evident in the way she hung on Lillian's every word, spellbound. Mere friends did not regard one another with such unerring, unwavering respect. Samantha herself was a testament to that. Sorry. I did not expect to be reading for so long. I thought this was going to be a real quick video, but obviously not. Though I believe I love her for reasons that are different to yours. What do you mean? I mean, though I love her poems, and I love her intellect, and I love her character, I do not know if I love her as a person. She is too aloof to grow attached to, and she does not allow others to get close to her. You know, I have often thought that I would like to crack open her head and scoop out all her secrets and see what's nestled inside her skull. That creepy face. If you cracked open her head, you would find nothing but viscera. You would be depriving everybody of a woman of great genius. Well, this thought also crossed my mind, and I don't want to become a murderer. I mean, De Quincey reconsidered, a playful smile flitting across her lips. I have to think I am exactly the kind of person who would commit murder if given the chance. Not particularly violent, but I have been known to do some rather foolish things when the urge strikes me, like running away from school. If somebody annoyed me enough, I might be tempted to take a swing at them with a knife just to see what would happen. Though murder is often regarded as a base act, I believe there may be a kind of art to it, if done correctly, with the right mise-en-scene. Samantha, who had probably come closer to stabbing somebody than De Quincey ever had, not that De Quincey knew this, backed away anxiously, her supposed acres of cheek white and spectral. Are you quite sure you want to confess these grisly inclinations to me right now, in the middle of the night, when we are the only ones here? I'm beginning to feel rather ill at ease. De Quincey giggled at her and let her second cigarette fall to the floor. Just as before, she extinguished its remaining life underneath her heel like a merciless god. Don't worry, Sam. I don't have a knife to hand right now, so you're probably good. I wouldn't want to murder anybody with my bare hands either. I lack a certain amount of passion. Passion? Mm-hmm. There'd be no blood, no gurgling moans, no whimpers of pain, no desperate gasps for air made through pursed lips. Just when it feels satisfying. I don't know if this is making me feel much better. Can you really look at murder as a matter of aesthetics? Everything in this world is a matter of aesthetics. I thought you, of all people, would understand, being a poet. But there are some things that shouldn't be spoken of lightly. Murder is a serious crime, you know. I know, and it's precisely because it's so serious that I want to treat it with the respect it deserves. It should be drawn out to wring the most pleasure from it that it's possible, like witch trials. Say what you want about how cruel it was, but at least they knew how to make a real narrative out of a murder. Such wanton cruelty, though barbaric, deserves to be revered in some form. De Quincey paused, pondering. Perhaps I should write something about it at some point. With this blue hair and the way she's just talking about how interesting murder is, she's kind of reminding me more of Perry from Fire Emblem Fates. Not quite to the same extent as Perry is, but like they could be siblings or something. Or maybe this could have been the better version of Perry. I don't know. Samantha frowned. She was not sure whether De Quincey was being serious in her assertions or not. Maybe De Quincey herself didn't even know. She was a difficult person to understand. But anyway, now that we have ascertained I didn't lure you out here under false pretenses to murder you, I suppose I return to the original point of our conversation. The original point of their conversation, whatever it was, had become so buried under a deluge of rambling De Quincey and detours, Samantha was struggling to remember what it was. What are you talking about? Well, you know, what happened between us. What I did to you, rather. During their lengthy interlude. Lengthy interlude. Samantha had almost managed to forget that. She had shoved the incident right to the back of her mind, as a mouse corpse might be discovered, hidden in the back of a pantry behind the glass jars of homemade jam and chutney. I suppose, perhaps I wasn't being entirely honest with you before. I was drunk at the time, it is true, but I think a part of me, and not a particularly small part either, wished to hurt you. I wanted to hurt you because I was jealous. The statement was so unexpected, Samantha could only stare, her eyes round as marbles and significantly larger. Jealous? Why were you jealous of me? I'm a wreck. De Quincey had held Samantha's hair back for her, away from her face, as she vomited into the toilet bowl, enough times to know. Samantha was always drinking, smoking, and ingesting things she should not, and then expelling all of it from her system when her body, weakened after all the abuse it had faced, buckled under the pressure and could not take it anymore. What about her shameful behavior, Samantha wondered, was so very worth of De Quincey's envy? Yes, I am aware. I know you are a wreck, more than the other girls at St. Mary's do, but that only makes things worse. Even though you are a little more than a wretched husk, hardly a full-functioning human being, Lillian still likes you. She likes you a lot. She must do, or else she would not try to remain so loyal to you, even though you frustrate her so. But Samantha was not so sure. Her relationship with Lillian had been strained these last few months, and badly too. Their conversation earlier that day appeared to her to have been the final blow. Lillian did not want to be her friend anymore. Even though Samantha loved Lillian so much, with every single fiber of her body, Lillian did not return that love. She had never returned that love. Now, Samantha was not even sure if Lillian liked her. I believe you were being too optimistic there. I doubt that Lillian still has any positive feelings towards me, and I cannot blame her either. I do not have any positive feelings towards myself either. But De Quincey waved Samantha's concerns aside with a small shake of her head, a careless laugh. Don't be silly. Though you may have fallen out, I am sure she will forgive you in due course. Though Lillian can be cold, she has always been considerably sweeter to you, of all people. That is just because we have known one another for a while. I know, despite our friendship, she finds me incredibly annoying. Believe it or not, I am very good at annoying people. I'll say, you annoy me a lot as well, you know. Suppose it's because we share so many negative traits. I have no doubt you feel the same towards me. The thought has crossed my mind on occasions. De Quincey smiled, smug and self-satisfied, as though she had managed to solve a complex mathematical quandary. See, we really are similar, and yet, despite our similarities, we are not the same, and Lillian will never regard me as she does you. She never will, because you are far superior to I in almost every regard, even in your wretchedness. Suppose that's why I felt jealous. I thought no matter what I did, it would never be enough. I would never be able to gain Lillian's friendship, because she's devoted too much of herself to you. And so, in a fit of madness, born from too much alcohol and my own irritation, decided to hurt you, as you had hurt me. I am a petty person after all. I have no problems admitting that. But lately, I've been thinking... De Quincey frowned. Although she had put out her cigarette, the discarded butts littered amongst the grass, looking strangely like broken fingers under the darkness. The smell lingered. I couldn't help but worry. Maybe I was the reason why you have looked so very melancholy these last 2 months. Maybe I really did go too far, and I upset you more than I intended. For that, I'm sorry. I really am. Well... Samantha looked down at the ground, at those crumpled cigarettes. She wondered if Miss Pope would find them tomorrow and get suspicious. Miss Pope had eagle eyes and was not one to be easily duped. I forgive you, I suppose. I do not like to hold grudges. I am not particularly good at it. They just make me feel gloomy, and it is all rather pointless anyway. I do not really want to think about what happened. Not any more than I have to. I just want to forget about it. Forgetting about things is one of my talents after all. I am far better than that, than I am at writing poetry. So you're not mad? No, I'm not mad. I'm just unhappy. That isn't your fault, though. I have been unhappy for such a long time, I doubt any outside intervention could change it. Not substantially, anyway. The only person who could cheer Samantha when she was submerged in the depths of dejection was Lillian, and Lillian no longer wanted anything to do with her. This is such a long ending, oh my word. To Quincey, what the... I know this is supposed to be more insightful stuff, but gosh dang it, Lillian. Gosh dang Lillian, gosh dang De Quincey. I don't know what names I just said. I felt like I said Lillian instead of De Quincey when I meant to say De Quincey. Without Lillian, what was there to be done? Samantha did not know. She did not care. All she wanted to do was disappear, just as the hazy cigarette smoke had done, as it dispersed through the air. Thank you for forgiveness, Sam. I'll cherish it. Do what you like with it. It's not worth much. Nothing I do is. You're always so hard on yourself. I wish you wouldn't be. I fail to see how my opinion of myself has any relevance to you. I suppose it doesn't, but despite all the things I said, I do consider myself your friend, even if you no longer wish to be mine. And as your friend, self-appointed though it may be, I feel there are 1 or 2 things I must tell you. What? Lillian, she does not love you. She is incapable of loving you, and nothing you do or say will ever sway her on this matter. You may be able to snail a shelf together through brute force, but you cannot bring 2 souls together in the same way. Emotions are not that simple. The more you pine after Lillian, the more it will hurt you, and I do not know how much more of this hurt you are capable of withstanding. It appears you may be close to your limit already. I respect you a lot, despite your numerous flaws and my own jealousy, and I am saying this as one friend to another. The more you try to follow her, the further away she will get. By loving her, you are destroying your own friendship, and I know how much her friendship means to you. I know how you adore her. I can see it in your eyes. If you ever wish to truly repair your relationship, you have to stop regarding her as an idol. I know this is for a fact because I regard Lillian in much the same way. She always attempts to avoid my company. I have no doubt she finds it stifling. If you wish to be her friend again, you must stop being so needy. If you can demonstrate to Lillian you can function without her constant company, she will begin to trust you again. But trust it is all it will ever be, not love. Dang, she's harsh, but I think she's got a point. But at least trust is better than pity, is it not? Samantha averted her eyes, suddenly incapable of looking at De Quincey's face. The other girl's expression was unusually earnest, her pale skin illuminated by the light of the moon. The moon was so large and full, it appeared as though it might split at any moment, leaking milky tears across the midnight sky. I know what you're saying is the truth, and I am aware of it myself, but... Samantha pressed a hand against her chest. Her heart burned horribly, as though inflamed with an illness. Samantha knew this to be melodramatic, but she could not help but wonder whether this was what it felt like when one's heart was breaking. Perhaps it was already broken. It had been for some time, but now the pieces were being splintered anew by De Quincey's well-meaning words until it ached simply to draw in breath. Samantha had always found the countryside, with its sprawling hills and verdant fields, comforting. Now, however, the countryside was cold and dark, distinctly unforgiving, and the trees were stripped bare of leaves. The heather, so beautiful under the sunlight, seemed like a thick, black sea of tar. Samantha was standing underneath the open sky, exposed to the heavens, yet rather than feeling free and exalted, she instead felt more enclosed than ever before. Perhaps it was the weight of her own morose feelings, pinning her in place to this dull, dreary, mortal world more effectively than any physical chain could. I just can't. I am not a sensible person. You should know this yourself, being just as impulsive as I. I am a slave to my own feelings, and I cannot see beyond them. I cannot think rationally. I love Lillian. I love her so much, and I can't stop. I don't know how. I have very much wanted to care less about her, as it would make my life a lot simpler, but no matter how hard I try, I am incapable of it. I just want to be with her, no matter how hopeless it might be. I want to stay by her side forever, though she will surely, within time, and perhaps already does, begin to view me as nothing more than a nuisance, a bother, a chore, but I can't help myself. Miss Pope really is right, and that is why I hate it so whenever she chides me. Her words always contain far too much truth, and the truth is always the bitterest medicine to swallow. I really do have no capacity or capability for change, even though changing would benefit me greatly, but I am never capable of thinking my own best interests. I'm such an idiot. Samantha did not know at what point during her furious strain of self-abasing comment she had begun to cry. It did not particularly matter. All she knew was, when she finished her tirade, her words lost to the howling wind, her eyes stunned, and her cheeks were wet, and her shoulders were trembling. Though she had cried numerous times before Roberta and Lillian, Samantha had tried not to do so before De Quincey. Samantha found De Quincey's slavish devotion towards Lillian even more pathetic than her own, and had, though she did not like to admit it, often considered herself to be superior to the younger girl. Samantha realized this was, perhaps, a touch ridiculous, given De Quincey had seen her ashen-faced and Seeing her ashen-faced and sweating. Her cheeks streaked with her own vomit on numerous occasions, but it was true all the same. But what little self-respect Samantha had left had gone, vanished like clocks blown from the head of a dandelion. What cause did she have for self-respect when Lillian no longer cared for her? She did not need it. She had no use for it. Samantha stood there, surrounded by the swaying heather, and sobbed miserably, brokenly, hiccuping every once in a while. She did not even bother attempting to brush her tears away. Instead, she held her arms at her sides, her head hanging like a broken doll. De Quincey surveyed her for a while, her eyes wide, unsure of what to do. Left with nothing to use to say, no comfort she could give that would not sound horribly trite when set against Samantha's sobs, De Quincey could muster nothing other than the thoroughly unnecessary, "Sam, are you all right?" Samantha did not reply. She did not need to. There were no words that could illuminate her feelings more accurately than her tears could. "Oh, Sam, you're more foolish than I thought. Can't believe Lillian ever liked an idiot like you." Funnily enough, this rebuke did not make Samantha feel better. If anything, it made her cry even harder. De Quincey heaved a heavy sigh and shook her head, her fluttering in the breeze. "If Lillian really has grown tired of you, I can see why. You would try the patience of a saint. And Lillian certainly is not one of those, no matter how much I admire her." A small pause. "Do not lose hope, though. Though things may seem bleak now, I am sure she will change her mind in due course. I have not spent such a great portion of my time at St. Mary's shadowy Lillian for nothing. But until that moment comes, I suppose there is nothing you could do other than wait. You should be well equipped to handle that much. After all, I believe you would wait for Lillian until the world stopped spinning, just so you could confess your feelings to her, just so she could break your heart all over again. I wonder." De Quincey pondered, reaching into her pocket for her third cigarette. The night air was cool, as were her feelings towards Samantha, and she wanted something to warm her up. Is it really worth it, though? Is that just where it cuts off? That's just where it cuts off. Dang! Just cuts off at, is it worth it, though? Like, oh my word. Quite an ending, though, and dang, it was long, though. My throat is starting to hurt like heck. I don't know if I can finish doing this.